Lieutenant Kayla Reyes stood at the edge of Outpost Vanguard, her breath creating small clouds in the frigid morning air of Talgara 9. The alien sun was just beginning to crest over the jagged mountain range to the east, casting an eerie purple glow across the valley below. This was her first morning as part of the Galactic Alliance's Alpha class, the first ever batch of human recruits permitted to train on the infamous survival outpost. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The voice startled her. Captain Marath, a towering Makari with iridescent scales that shifted from blue to green as he moved, had approached without making a sound, a trait his species was known for. "It's intense," Kayla replied, adjusting the environmental filter on her collar. The air on Talgara 9 was breathable for humans, but barely. "I've never seen vegetation that color before." The Zakar Valley stretched before them, a vast expanse of dense, violet foliage that stood nearly 30 meters tall in some places. The vegetation pulsed slightly, as if breathing, and Kayla knew from her briefings that most of it was highly toxic to the touch. "This place has killed more recruits than any other training ground in the Alliance," Marath said, matter-of-factly. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Kayla had learned indicated respect among the Makari. "It will test every aspect of your survival instinct. The fact that humans are being allowed here at all is controversial." Kayla nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Alliance, and many of the older races viewed them as fragile, primitive creatures who had no business in the elite ranks of the GDF, the Galactic Defense Force. "The lieutenant commander briefed us on the statistics," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. 43% fatality rate among first-year trainees." Marath's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. "And that was among Chitan and Draxus recruits. Species evolved for predatory environments. Humans are—" He paused, seemingly searching for a diplomatic word. "Less equipped for Talgara's challenges." "We'll see about that, Captain." Kayla turned to face him fully, standing as tall as her 5'7" frame would allow. Next to the 7-foot Makari, she felt like a child, but she refused to be intimidated. Earth had its own deadly environments, and she had trained in most of them. "That's the spirit, Lieutenant." Marath's voice carried a note of genuine approval. "First patrol begins in 30 minutes. Your squad will take the northwestern quadrant. Familiarize yourself with the terrain, identify potential hazards, and return before nightfall." He tapped a command into his wrist unit, and Kayla's own device pinged with the mission parameters. "And Lieutenant, don't die on your first day. The paperwork is tremendous." With that, he turned and moved back toward the main compound, his large form gliding almost weightlessly across the rocky ground. Kayla took one last look at the alien landscape before following. The atmosphere of Talgara 9 seemed to press down on her, with an almost physical weight. The higher gravity, the slightly thinner oxygen, the strange smells of alien plant life. For a moment, homesickness gripped her with surprising intensity. Earth, with its familiar blue skies and comfortable 1G gravity, seemed impossibly far away. She pushed the feeling aside. She hadn't come this far to succumb to nostalgia on day one. The barracks were a study in utilitarian efficiency, a series of interconnected pods designed to house various species in their preferred environmental conditions. The human section was at the far end, currently occupied only by Kayla and the 3 other human recruits in Alpha class. "Look who finally decided to join us." Corporal Winters looked up from where he was checking his gear. "Get lost admiring the scenery, Reyes." "Just getting mission parameters from Captain Marath," she replied, moving to her locker to retrieve her patrol kit. "Northwestern quadrant. We leave in 20. "Great," muttered Private Santos, the youngest of their group at barely 22. "The bog sector. I've heard the mud there can dissolve standard issue boots in under an hour. That's why we have these." Sergeant Cooper, the oldest and most experienced of the human recruits, tossed specialized footwear to each of them. Chitinous polymer. Cost more than my first ground car back on Earth. Try not to lose them. As they geared up, Kayla couldn't help but notice the tension in her fellow humans. They were all accomplished soldiers. You didn't get selected for the GDF's elite training program without exceptional qualifications. But this environment was alien in every sense of the word. The standard rules of warfare and survival that had served them on Earth might be worse than useless here. A sharp tone sounded throughout the barracks, the 5-minute warning. "Remember," Cooper said as they performed final equipment checks. "Stick to the protocol. No heroics. We're here to observe and learn today, not to prove anything." Kayla nodded, but internally, she disagreed. Every step they took, every decision they made, would be scrutinized by the non-human officers, evaluating whether humanity deserved a place in the Alliance's elite forces. They were constantly proving themselves, whether they wanted to or not. The patrol began uneventfully enough. The 4 humans moved in standard diamond formation through the edge of the forest, sensors sweeping for signs of the numerous predators that called this region home. The vegetation around them was unlike anything on Earth. Plants that moved with apparent intelligence, flowers that emitted sounds like distant singing, fungi that pulsed with bioluminescent light. "Life signs approximately 30 meters ahead," Santos reported, checking her scanner. "Multiple signatures, small to medium size." "Probably a herd of Kritax," Cooper responded. "Herbivores, but territorial. We should circle around." They adjusted their course, moving deeper into the forest to avoid the potential confrontation. The light dimmed as the canopy thickened above them, casting everything in a strange, violet twilight. The air grew thicker, filled with spores and the sweet, sour smell of alien vegetation. 2 hours into their patrol, they reached a small clearing where several fallen trees created a natural barrier. Cooper signaled for a brief rest, and they took the opportunity to hydrate and check their equipment. "This isn't so bad," Winters said, taking a swig from his canteen. "All the horror stories about this place had me expecting to be fighting for my life every 5 minutes." "Days young," Cooper replied dryly. "And we haven't even reached the real danger zones yet." Kayla was about to respond when a sound caught her attention. A high-pitched whine, almost beyond the range of human hearing, coming from somewhere to their left. She held up a hand for silence and pointed. "I hear it too," Santos confirmed, already scanning in that direction. "Not matching any known Talgaran fauna in the database." "Could be mechanical," Cooper suggested, his face grim. "We were briefed about the Silvax rebels sometimes placing traps for Alliance patrols." They approached cautiously, weapons ready. The sound led them to a dense thicket of thorny vegetation, the purple barbs glistening with some kind of natural secretion. Kayla took point, using her monoblade to carefully clear a path. What they found on the other side made them all freeze. A massive creature was thrashing in what was clearly a trap, a net of some kind that tightened with each movement. The animal was unlike anything Kayla had seen in the briefings, nearly 3 meters long from snout to tail. Its body was covered in plates that resembled obsidian armor, with spikes protruding along its spine. 6 muscular limbs ended in claws that could easily disembowel a human with a single swipe. But it was the head that captured Kayla's attention, sleek and angular, with eyes that glowed amber in the dim light, radiating an intelligence that seemed almost sentient. "That's a Tarvok," Cooper whispered, his voice tight with controlled fear. "Apex predator of the Northern Hemisphere. Incredibly dangerous. We need to back away, slowly." But Kayla couldn't move. The creature had locked eyes with her, and she felt something pass between them. Not a communication exactly, but an assessment. The Tarvok had stopped thrashing and was watching her with an eerie stillness. "The trap isn't Alliance standard," she said quietly, her eyes never leaving the predators. Look at the mechanisms. That's Sylvax technology. Doesn't matter, Winters hissed. That thing could kill all four of us without breaking a sweat. Protocol says we report it and move on. But Kayla was already analyzing the trap. The more the Tarvok struggled, the tighter the filaments became. They were already cutting into its armored hide in places, drawing iridescent blue blood. It'll be dead before a response team arrives, she said, making a decision that part of her knew was foolish. And the Sylvax will have gotten exactly what they wanted: the elimination of a local apex predator to disrupt the ecosystem. Before anyone could stop her, Kayla moved forward, her monoblade extended. The Tarvok growled, a sound so deep it seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath their feet. "Reyes, stand down!" Cooper ordered, but his voice seemed distant to Kayla. She approached the trapped creature carefully, making her movements slow and deliberate. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said softly, knowing the words meant nothing to the alien predator, but hoping her tone might convey her intent. "I'm going to cut you loose." The Tarvok watched her, its massive head following her every move. As she reached the edge of the trap, she could see the control mechanism, a small, Sylvax device designed to gradually constrict the net until its prey was either immobilized for capture or killed. With precise movements, Kayla disabled the control unit first, stopping the automatic tightening. Then, carefully selecting a spot where the filaments were pulled taut, but not pressing directly against the creature's body, she activated her monoblade and sliced through the net. The reaction was immediate. The tension in the remaining filaments released, and the Tarvok surged upward. Kayla stumbled backward, losing her footing and falling onto her back as the massive predator rose to its full height, nearly 2 meters tall on its hind limbs. Cooper, Winters, and Santos all raised their weapons, but the Tarvok didn't attack. It stood over Kayla, its amber eyes studying her with an intensity that made her heart pound against her ribs. She remained absolutely still, not even daring to breathe. After what felt like an eternity, the creature lowered itself back to all 6 limbs, turned, and moved away into the forest, its armored body disappearing among the violet foliage with surprising grace for something so large. "Are you out of your mind?" Cooper hauled Kayla to her feet, his face flushed with anger. "You could have gotten us all killed." "It was dying," she said simply, still staring at the spot where the Tarvok had vanished. "And it didn't attack. It could have killed me easily, but it didn't." "That's not the point," Cooper snapped. "We're a team. You don't make unilateral decisions that endanger the entire unit." Kayla knew he was right. But something about the encounter had shaken her deeply. The intelligence she'd seen in those amber eyes. It hadn't been mere animal cunning. There had been something more. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "It won't happen again." They continued their patrol. But the atmosphere had changed. Cooper kept shooting disapproving glances her way, while Santos seemed fascinated by what had happened, peppering Kayla with questions about what it had felt like to be so close to the legendary predator. Winters remained silent, but his body language suggested he was siding with Cooper in considering her actions reckless. As they neared the edge of their assigned quadrant, the sky began to darken unexpectedly. What had been a clear, purple-tinged sky was now filling with clouds the color of bruises. "Atmospheric disturbance approaching," Santos reported, checking her scanner. "Looks like an acid storm. We should find shelter." They quickened their pace, searching for suitable cover. The environmental briefing had been explicit about Talgara's acid storms, rain with a pH level that could burn through standard issue gear in minutes. "There," Cooper pointed to a rock formation about 200 meters ahead. "Natural cave system. Should provide adequate protection." They were halfway to the shelter when the first drops began to fall. The acid hissed as it struck the vegetation around them, leaving small, smoking holes in the leaves. Kayla felt a drop hit her shoulder and winced at the immediate burning sensation that penetrated her uniform. "Run!" Cooper ordered, and they abandoned formation, sprinting for the cave entrance. The rain intensified rapidly, becoming a downpour that obscured visibility and filled the air with a caustic mist. Kayla could feel her exposed skin beginning to blister, and her eyes burned from the acidic vapor. Suddenly, a massive shadow appeared beside her, keeping pace as she ran. Kayla's heart nearly stopped as she recognized the obsidian armor plates and amber eyes of the Tarvok. It had been following them. "Cooper!" she shouted, but her voice was lost in the roar of the storm. The Tarvok moved closer, and Kayla braced for an attack, her hand reaching for her sidearm. But instead of striking, the creature positioned itself between her and the worst of the acid rain, its armored body providing a shield as they raced toward the cave. They reached the shelter seconds before the storm reached full intensity, diving into the relative safety of the rocky overhang. Cooper, Santos, and Winters already had their weapons trained on the Tarvok as it followed Kayla into the cave. "Don't shoot!" Kayla raised her hands, placing herself between her team and the predator. "It just saved me out there. It used its body to shield me from the worst of the acid." "That's impossible," Winters said, his weapon unwavering. "These things are mindless killers. It's probably just waiting for the best moment to attack." But the Tarvok made no aggressive moves. It settled onto its haunches, near the cave entrance, amber eyes reflecting the lightning that now flashed across the valley, and began to methodically lick the acid from its armored plates. "I don't think it's going to hurt us," Kayla said, her voice filled with wonder. "I think it's protecting me, because I freed it from the trap." Cooper lowered his weapon slightly, his expression dubious. "That would imply a level of intelligence and emotional capacity these creatures aren't supposed to have." "Maybe our information is wrong," Kayla suggested, watching as the Tarvok finished cleaning itself and turned its attention to the storm outside, seemingly standing guard. "The Alliance hasn't been on Talgara 9 that long. There's still so much we don't know about the native species." They settled into an uneasy standoff. The humans clustered at the back of the cave while the Tarvok remained by the entrance. As the storm raged outside, Kayla found herself studying the creature with growing fascination. Its movements were precise and economical, its attention constantly shifting between the threats outside and the humans within the cave. "The storm's going to last at least an hour, according to the scanner," Santos reported. "We'll miss our check-in if we wait it out." "We can't go out in that anyway," Cooper replied. He cast a meaningful glance at the Tarvok. "And we have another problem to deal with." "It's not a problem," Kayla insisted. "If it wanted to hurt us, it would have done so already." "That's not the point," Cooper said. "Protocol is clear. Any close encounter with a Class A predator species requires immediate reporting and containment procedures." "Containment?" Kayla's voice rose sharply. "You mean kill it?" "Or capture. But yes, that's the protocol." Cooper's expression was stern. "These creatures are responsible for more recruit deaths than any other single factor on Talgara 9. They're intelligent enough to hunt in packs, set ambushes, and they can track prey for days. They're considered a critical threat to the outpost's security." Kayla looked back at the Tarvok, which was now watching their conversation with apparent interest. Its head tilted slightly, as if trying to understand their words. "This one's different," she said firmly. "It had every opportunity to kill me, but instead, it protected me. That suggests a capacity for gratitude, for forming bonds. That's beyond what any briefing has attributed to them." The argument might have continued, but a sound from outside the cave silenced them all. A high-pitched whine, similar to what had led them to the trapped Tarvok earlier. The predator's reaction was immediate and alarming. It rose to its full height, spines along its back extending to their maximum length, and emitted a low growl that seemed to resonate through the cave. "Something's out there," Santos whispered, raising her scanner. Multiple signatures, not matching any known Talgaran fauna. Because they're not fauna, Cooper said grimly, checking his weapon. That's Silvax tech, the same kind we found on the trap. The Tarvok moved closer to Kayla, positioning itself between her and the cave entrance. Its behavior was so deliberate, so protective, that even Cooper paused. It thinks we're a pack, Kayla realized aloud. It's treating us, treating me, as part of its territory, something to be defended. Before anyone could respond, objects began to roll into the cave entrance, small metallic spheres that immediately began emitting a high-frequency sound that made the humans wince in discomfort. The effect on the Tarvok was far more dramatic. The creature howled in pain, thrashing its head from side to side as if trying to dislodge something inside its skull. It staggered, nearly falling, before charging blindly toward the cave entrance. "Sonic disruptors!" Cooper shouted. "Targeted to Tarvok neural frequencies. Take cover!" Kayla didn't think. She acted, grabbing her helmet, which had built-in sound dampeners for protection against certain alien environments. She lunged forward and somehow managed to secure it over the Tarvok's head, covering one of its primary auditory sensors. The effect was immediate. The creature stopped thrashing, though it still trembled with obvious pain. It turned its massive head toward Kayla, and again, she felt that strange connection, a recognition that transcended species. "We need to neutralize those disruptors," she said, drawing her sidearm. "Cover me!" Before Cooper could object, she darted forward, using the Tarvok's massive body as partial cover. She fired 3 precise shots, destroying 2 of the sonic devices. Shadowy figures moved at the cave entrance. Silvax rebels, their distinctive segmented armor visible in the flashes of lightning. They hadn't expected resistance, clearly assuming the sonic disruptors would incapacitate both the Tarvok and the humans. The firefight was brief, but intense. Cooper, Winters, and Santos laid down suppressing fire, while Kayla and the partially recovered Tarvok advanced. The Predator seemed to understand their strategy intuitively, moving in perfect coordination with Kayla's advances. When it was over, 3 Silvax rebels lay dead at the cave entrance, while 2 more had fled into the acid storm, a desperation move that virtually guaranteed a painful death. "Check for communications devices," Cooper ordered, approaching the fallen rebels cautiously. "We need to know if they reported our position." As the others searched the bodies, Kayla turned her attention to the Tarvok. It was watching her with those intelligent amber eyes, head tilted as if asking a question. "Thank you," she said softly, reaching out slowly to retrieve her helmet from where it had fallen in the struggle. The creature made no move to stop her, allowing her to approach closely. On impulse, she extended her hand, palm up, toward the Tarvok's snout, a gesture she might have used with a dog back on Earth. To her amazement, the Predator leaned forward slightly, allowing its armored snout to make brief contact with her palm. The touch lasted only a second, but it sent a jolt through Kayla that had nothing to do with fear. This wasn't just an animal responding to being freed from a trap. This was genuine connection, a bridge across species that should, by all logic, have been natural enemies. "Reyes," Cooper's voice broke the moment. "We have a problem. These aren't just rebels. They're advanced scouts. And according to their communications log, they've been systematically capturing and releasing Tarvoks throughout the region after implanting them with some kind of control device." Kayla looked back at the Tarvok, a chill running through her. "You think this one is implanted? That it's been following us because it's being controlled?" "I don't know," Cooper admitted. "But we need to report this immediately. If the Silvax have found a way to weaponize the apex predators of Talgara 9, the implications were clear. The outpost, with its hundreds of trainees and personnel, would be vulnerable to a coordinated attack by creatures that knew the terrain better than any off-worlder." The acid storm was beginning to wane, the torrential downpour reducing to a light drizzle that was still dangerous, but navigable with proper protection. "We move in 5, Cooper decided. "Maximum speed back to the outpost." And Reyes, he glanced at the Tarvok, which had settled back onto its haunches, watching them with that unsettling intelligence. "Your new friend can't come with us. The perimeter defenses are programmed to eliminate any Tarvok that approaches within 500 meters. Kayla nodded, though the thought of leaving the creature behind created an unexpected pang of regret. She approached it one last time, maintaining eye contact. "You should go now," she said softly. "It's not safe for you to follow us anymore." The Tarvok blinked slowly, then rose to its feet. For a moment, Kayla thought it understood, that it would turn and disappear back into the forest. Instead, it moved to the cave entrance and stood there, clearly waiting for them to move out. "I don't think it's going to listen," Santos observed, a note of amusement in her voice. "Then, we'll have to lose it on the way," Cooper said firmly. "We can't bring a Tarvok back to Outpost Vanguard, implanted or not. That's just asking for a court-martial." They set out at a brisk pace, taking a more direct route back to the outpost than their original patrol path. The Tarvok followed at a distance, sometimes disappearing from sight, only to reappear minutes later, tracking them with ease through the alien forest. Every attempt to lose the creature failed. It seemed to anticipate their changes in direction, circling around to intercept them. After the third such attempt, Cooper finally threw up his hands in frustration. "Fine. Let it follow us to the perimeter. When the automated defenses target it, maybe it'll finally get the message." Kayla wasn't so sure. Something about the Tarvok's persistence suggested it wouldn't be deterred by perimeter defenses. And if it really did have a Silvax implant, the thought that had been forming in her mind crystallized into certainty. "What if that's exactly what the Silvax want?" she said suddenly, stopping in her tracks. "What if the implants are designed to drive the Tarvoks toward the outpost, knowing the defenses will fire on them?" Cooper frowned. "To what end? The defenses would eliminate them before they could do any damage." "Unless the Tarvoks are just delivery systems," Kayla theorized, the horrible logic becoming clear. "What if the implants contain something else, explosives, biological agents, that would be released when the defense systems target them?" The possibility hung in the air between them, too plausible to dismiss. "We need to warn the outpost," Cooper decided. "And we need to capture that Tarvok alive for examination." Kayla nodded, relief washing over her. "I think I can help with that." She turned back to where the predator was watching from about 50 meters away, partially concealed among the violet foliage. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward it, ignoring Cooper's warning to stay in formation. The Tarvok didn't retreat as she approached. It watched her with those intelligent eyes, head tilted in what almost seemed like curiosity. "I need you to come with me," Kayla said, knowing the words meant nothing, but hoping her intent might somehow be communicated. "There might be something inside you, something dangerous. We need to remove it." To her amazement, the creature lowered its massive head, almost a gesture of submission. Carefully, she reached out to touch the armored plate just behind its head, where she imagined a control implant might be placed. The Tarvok flinched slightly at her touch, but allowed her to run her fingers along its spine. She felt nothing unusual, no sign of surgical intervention. But that didn't mean the implant wasn't there. It could be subcutaneous, or deeper. "Come on," she said, turning back toward her team. "Let's go home." To the astonishment of Cooper, Winters, and Santos, the Tarvok fell into step beside Kayla, matching its pace to hers as they continued toward the outpost. "I've never seen anything like that," Santos whispered. "It's like it's been tamed." "Not tamed," Kayla corrected. "We're cooperating. There's a difference." As they approached the perimeter of Outpost Vanguard, Cooper called ahead to explain the situation. There was considerable resistance to the idea of allowing a Tarvok inside the defensive perimeter. But the potential threat of the Silvax implants was too serious to ignore. A reception committee awaited them at the outer checkpoint. A squad of heavily armed security personnel, led by none other than Lieutenant Vor, a Chitan officer known for his strict adherence to protocol and his general disdain for human recruits. "This is highly irregular. Sergeant Cooper." Vor's voice was cold as he surveyed the group, his compound eyes narrowing at the sight of the Tarvok standing calmly beside Kayla. "Bringing a Class A predator into the outpost violates at least 7 security protocols." "The circumstances are exceptional, sir," Cooper replied formally. "We have reason to believe the Silvax rebels are implanting control devices in Tarvoks, possibly as part of a larger attack plan." Vor's attention shifted to Kayla. "And you, Lieutenant Reyes. I understand this creature has been following you specifically. Explain." Kayla straightened to attention. "I freed it from a Silvax trap during our patrol, sir. Since then, it has demonstrated protective behavior toward me and the team. It helped us fend off a Silvax attack during the acid storm." "Protective behavior?" Vor's tone made it clear he found the idea absurd. "These creatures are mindless killing machines. Lieutenant, any perceived protection is either coincidence or evidence that it is indeed being controlled by external forces." The Tarvok growled low in its throat, as if offended by Vor's dismissal. The security team tensed, weapons raising slightly. "With respect, sir," Kayla said carefully, "I believe our understanding of Tarvok intelligence may be incomplete. This one has demonstrated reasoning, memory, and what appears to be gratitude. But regardless of its natural behavior, if there is a Silvax implant, we need to find and neutralize it." Vor considered this for a long moment, his compound eyes unreadable. Finally, he nodded sharply. "The creature will be taken to the xenobiology lab for immediate examination. Security will handle it from here." "Sir," Kayla interjected, "the Tarvok has formed some kind of bond with me. It might resist if separated. Request permission to accompany it to the lab." Vor's mandibles clicked in what might have been irritation. "You are not qualified for xenobiological procedures, Lieutenant." "No, sir, but I may be able to keep it calm during the examination. It trusts me, or at least, it associates me with safety." After another long pause, Vor reluctantly agreed. "Very well, but at the first sign of aggression, security will neutralize the threat. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir," Kayla replied, hoping it wouldn't come to that. She turned to the Tarvok, which was watching the exchange with evident interest. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's get you checked out." The xenobiology lab was a state-of-the-art facility at the heart of the outpost, designed to study the diverse and often dangerous life forms of Talgara 9. Dr. Ilara Tivran, a Lysithian xenobiologist with a reputation for brilliant, if somewhat unorthodox research methods, greeted them with undisguised excitement. "A live Tarvok specimen, and exhibiting non-aggressive behavior?" Her 6-fingered hands moved rapidly as she prepared scanning equipment. "This is unprecedented." The Tarvok allowed itself to be led into a large examination chamber, though it stayed close to Kayla, occasionally brushing against her leg as if seeking reassurance. "I need you to keep it still for the deep tissue scan," Dr. Tivran instructed, adjusting a large piece of equipment that descended from the ceiling. "It won't hurt, but the sensation might be unfamiliar." Kayla nodded, placing a hand on the Tarvok's armored shoulder. "It's okay," she murmured. "This will help us figure out what's going on." The scan took nearly 30 minutes, during which the Tarvok remained remarkably cooperative, moving only occasionally to adjust its position or to look around the lab with evident curiosity. When the results appeared on Dr. Tivran's display, her expression grew serious. "There is indeed an implant," she confirmed, highlighting an area at the base of the Tarvok's skull. "Sophisticated technology, not just a tracking device or simple control mechanism. This appears to be transmitting and receiving data. What kind of data? Lieutenant Vore asked, having joined them for the results. Neural patterns. Primarily, Dr. Tavran explained. It's monitoring the creature's sensory input, possibly its thought patterns, and transmitting that information somewhere. But there's more. She manipulated the display, zooming in on a secondary component of the implant. This part contains a payload of some kind. I can't identify it without extraction, but the structure suggests either an explosive compound or a biological agent. Can you remove it? Kayla asked, her hand still resting on the Tarvok's shoulder. Dr. Tavran nodded slowly. Yes, but it's risky. The implant is integrated with the creature's central nervous system. Removal could cause permanent damage or death if not done precisely. What about deactivating it? Cooper suggested. Cut the transmission without full removal. Possibly, the xenobiologist agreed. That would be less risky for the Tarvok, but it would prevent us from analyzing the payload to determine the full extent of the threat. Lieutenant Vore's compound eyes narrowed. The creature's welfare is not our priority. Doctor, we need to understand what we're facing. Kayla felt the Tarvok tense under her hand, as if it understood the callousness in Vore's tone. Sir, she interjected, if we harm or kill this Tarvok, we lose a valuable opportunity. It's cooperating with us willingly. That's unprecedented and could provide insights into these creatures that would benefit the outpost's security long-term. Vore clicked his mandibles dismissively. Your attachment to this beast is clouding your judgment, Lieutenant. This is a security matter, not a xenozoological study. Before Kayla could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the outpost. The emergency communication system activated, and Captain Maroth's voice echoed through the lab. Perimeter breach in Sectors 3, 7, and 9. Multiple Tarvok signatures detected within the defensive line. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. The Silvax attack had begun. Lieutenant Vore was already moving, barking orders into his communicator. Security teams to breach points. Authorization for lethal force against all Tarvok intruders. Kayla looked at the Tarvok beside her, a terrible realization dawning. Sir, wait. The implants, if they contain biological or explosive payloads, killing the Tarvoks could be exactly what the Silvax want. Vore paused, his tactical mind processing the implication. Explain. If these implants are designed to release their payload upon the death of the host, Kayla theorized rapidly, then the standard response, shooting the Tarvoks, would actually trigger the weapon. It's a delivery system disguised as an invasion. Dr. Tavran was nodding vigorously. The lieutenant's theory is sound. The implant contains a mechanism that could easily be triggered by the host's death. Vore hesitated only briefly before issuing new orders. All units, modify response. Tarvok intruders are to be contained, not eliminated. Repeat, non-lethal measures only. We need a way to neutralize the implants, Cooper said, joining the rapidly forming crisis group. Doctor, can your deactivation method be adapted for field use? Possibly, Tavran replied, already turning to her equipment. A targeted electromagnetic pulse might disrupt the transmission function without triggering the payload. But I'd need time to calibrate it correctly. Time is something we don't have, Vore snapped. The perimeter has already been breached. Kayla looked at the Tarvok beside her, an idea forming. What if we could use the implant against itself? If they're all on the same transmission frequency? Dr. Tavran's eyes widened as she grasped Kayla's meaning. A feedback loop. Yes. If we boost the signal from this implant and reverse the transmission direction, we could potentially overload the others. Would that neutralize the payload? Vore demanded. It should prevent remote detonation, at least, the xenobiologist confirmed. But I'll need access to the main communications array to generate a strong enough signal. That's on the other side of the compound, Cooper pointed out. through areas that might already be compromised. Kayla turned to the Tarvok, a plan crystallizing in her mind. I'll go with Dr. Tavran. The Tarvok will come with us. It might be able to keep the others at bay long enough for us to reach the communications array. Lieutenant Vore looked like he wanted to object, but another alarm sounded. The breach was expanding. They were out of options. Go, he ordered tersely. Cooper, Santos, Winters, escort team, priority mission. I'll coordinate defense from the command center. They moved quickly through the outpost, the sounds of chaos growing around them. Occasionally, they caught glimpses of other Tarvoks, moving with unnatural coordination, heading for specific targets within the compound. Unlike Kayla's companion, these others showed no signs of individual intelligence. Their movements were mechanical, their attacks precise, but lacking the fluidity of natural predatory behavior. They're being directly controlled, Dr. Tavran observed, as they ducked into a service corridor to avoid a patrol of security personnel, engaging one such Tarvok. The implants must have overridden their natural neural patterns. But not this one, Kayla said, looking at her Tarvok, which remained close beside her, alert, but still responding to her guidance. Why is it different? Perhaps the control isn't absolute, the xenobiologist suggested. Or perhaps something interrupted the programming sequence when you freed it from the trap. They reached the communications center to find it abandoned, the staff having been called to emergency stations elsewhere. Dr. Tavran moved immediately to the main console, her six-fingered hands flying over the controls. I need to connect the implant signal to the main array, she explained, pulling equipment from her medical kit. Lieutenant, I need your Tarvok to stay completely still for this. Kayla nodded, kneeling beside the creature. I need you to stay very still, she said softly, maintaining eye contact with those intelligent amber orbs. This might feel strange, but it will help stop the others. Whether it understood her words or simply responded to her tone. The Tarvok lowered itself to the floor, becoming almost statue-like in its stillness. Dr. Tavran worked quickly, attaching sensors to the area where the implant was located and connecting them to the communications array. This should create a feedback loop through all devices operating on this frequency, she explained. The signal will essentially tell the implants to shut down their control functions without triggering the payload. How long will it take? Cooper asked, watching the door nervously. The sounds of fighting were getting closer. A few minutes to calibrate precisely, the xenobiologist replied. Too strong, and we might kill all the Tarvoks by frying their neural systems. Too weak, and the signal won't override the Silvax control. Suddenly, the door to the communications center burst open. 3 Tarvoks entered, moving with the same mechanical precision Kayla had noted earlier. Behind them, 2 Silvax rebels in full combat gear directed their movements with handheld control devices. Stop them! Cooper shouted, opening fire on the rebels, while Santos and Winters targeted the controlled Tarvoks with stun weapons. Kayla's Tarvok rose from its position, placing itself between the attackers and Dr. Tavran's workstation. It emitted a roar so powerful that everyone in the room momentarily froze, a territorial challenge that seemed to temporarily confuse even the controlled Tarvoks. The moment of hesitation was enough for Cooper to take down one of the Silvax rebels with a well-placed shot. The other rebel, seeing the tide turning, frantically manipulated his control device. The 3 controlled Tarvoks responded immediately, charging toward Kayla and Dr. Tavran with lethal intent. Kayla's Tarvok met them head-on, its natural fighting abilities proving superior to their programmed attacks. It fought with a fluid grace that the others lacked, using the environment and coordinating its movements with the human defenders in a way that suggested true tactical intelligence. Almost there, Dr. Tavran called over the chaos. The signal is aligning. We just need another 30 seconds. The remaining Silvax rebel seemed to realize what they were attempting. With a desperate lunge, he threw himself toward the communications console, a small, explosive device clutched in his hand. Kayla intercepted him, tackling him to the ground before he could reach the equipment. They struggled briefly before she managed to disarm him, knocking the device away. The rebel snarled something in his native language, a curse, probably, before triggering a hidden mechanism in his armor. A cloud of acrid smoke erupted around them, and Kayla felt her lungs burning as she inadvertently inhaled some of it. She staggered back, vision blurring, aware that the toxin was specifically designed to target human physiology. Through the haze of pain and disorientation, she saw her Tarvok break off from its fight with the controlled predators, rushing to her side. It nudged her urgently away from the spreading toxin cloud, pushing her toward cleaner air near Dr. Tavran's position. "Got it!" the xenobiologist exclaimed triumphantly, activating the modified signal. "Transmitting now!" The effect was immediate and dramatic. All three of the controlled Tarvoks suddenly stopped moving, their bodies going rigid as the feedback loop disrupted the implant's signals. After a moment of eerie stillness, they collapsed to the ground, not dead, but unconscious as their natural neural patterns reasserted themselves. Kayla's Tarvok, however, remained standing, though it shook its massive head as if trying to clear it. The implant in its brain had been affected by the signal, but differently, perhaps because it had already partially broken free of the control. "It worked," Cooper said, lowering his weapon as he surveyed the scene. "Tavran, can you broadcast this signal to the entire outpost?" "Already done," she confirmed. "All implanted Tarvoks within range should be neutralized." Kayla, still struggling to breathe properly from the toxin exposure, leaned against her Tarvok for support. The creature stood firm, allowing her to use its strength, a conscious choice to help that went beyond any programmed response or simple conditioning. "We need to get you to medical," Santos said, noting Kayla's distress. "That was Silvac's neurotoxin. It can cause permanent damage to human respiratory systems." Before they could move, however, Lieutenant Vore entered the communications center, accompanied by a full security team. His compound eyes took in the scene, the unconscious Tarvoks, the dead Silvax rebel, and Kayla leaning against her Tarvok companion. "The situation is under control," he announced. "All Tarvok intruders have been neutralized. The Silvax attack has failed." His gaze settled on Kayla and her Tarvok. "It seems your theory was correct, Lieutenant. The implants were indeed designed to deliver a biological agent upon the death of the host. Your intervention prevented what could have been a catastrophic contamination." Kayla tried to respond, but another wave of pain from the toxin made her cough violently instead. The Tarvok beside her made a sound of concern, a rumbling whine that seemed impossibly gentle coming from such a fearsome predator. "Get Lieutenant Reyes to medical immediately," Vore ordered. Then, more reluctantly, he added, "The Tarvok may accompany her. It appears to be attached." As they made their way to the medical bay, Kayla maintained contact with her unlikely companion, one hand resting on its armored shoulder for support. The creature matched its pace perfectly to her labored steps, occasionally looking up at her with those intelligent amber eyes that now seemed to hold genuine concern. In the medical bay, Dr. Sorvin, the chief medical officer, initially balked at the presence of a Tarvok in his facility, but quickly focused on treating Kayla's toxin exposure when he understood the urgency. "The damage is significant but not irreversible," he explained after his examination. "You'll need a series of regenerative treatments over the next few days, but there should be no permanent impairment." Throughout the treatment, the Tarvok remained at Kayla's side, watchful but calm, ignoring the nervous glances from the medical staff. When Dr. Tavran arrived to check on both of them, she brought surprising news. "I've completed a more thorough analysis of the implant structure," she said, pulling up detailed scans on a nearby display. "It's fascinating, really. The Silvax technology was sophisticated, but it had a fundamental flaw. The control mechanism wasn't designed to override a Tarvok's neural system completely. It was more of a suggestion system, using pain and reward stimuli to direct behavior. Then why did the others seem so completely controlled? Kayla asked, her voice hoarse from the toxin's effects. Because they never had a reason to resist, the xenobiologist explained. The implant's suggestions aligned with their natural predatory instincts: attack, hunt, kill. But this one, she gestured to Kayla's Tarvok, had a competing motivation. You.
Me?
You freed it from the trap, creating a positive association. When the implant tried to direct it to attack humans later, that contradicted the positive association it had formed with you. It created cognitive dissonance that the Tarvok resolved by ignoring the implant's directions and following its own decision to protect you instead. Kayla looked at the Tarvok with new understanding. It wasn't just animal gratitude or conditioning. It had made a choice, overriding both its natural instincts and the artificial commands from the implant. So what happens now? She asked, reaching out to touch the Tarvok's armored head. With the implant, I can remove it safely, now that we understand its structure better, Dr. Tavran replied. Or simply deactivate it permanently. Either way, your friend here will be free of Silvak's influence. And then what? It can't stay in the outpost indefinitely. Lieutenant Vor, who had entered silently during their conversation, surprisingly offered an answer. Perhaps it can, he said, his normally stern voice thoughtful. The Defense Council is convening tomorrow to discuss the Silvak's attack and our response. I've recommended that you present your experiences with this Tarvok as evidence that our understanding of these creatures has been incomplete. Kayla looked at him in surprise. Sir? The Alliance values adaptability. Lieutenant Reyes, your unorthodox approach to this situation ultimately saved the outpost from a devastating attack. Perhaps there is something to be learned from your methods. His compound eyes shifted to the Tarvok. And from your companion. 2 days later, still recovering from the toxin exposure, but well enough to stand before the Defense Council, Kayla presented her case. The Tarvok, now free of its implant, stood beside her, a living testament to the possibility of understanding between species that had previously been considered irreconcilable enemies. The traditional approach to Talgera's apex predators has been based on fear and assumptions. She concluded her presentation. We classified them as mindless threats to be eliminated rather than intelligent beings to be understood. This Tarvok has demonstrated problem-solving abilities, emotional responses, memory, and the capacity to form bonds across species lines. These aren't the behaviors of a simple predator. They're the hallmarks of a sentient being worthy of our respect. General Krillon, the first commander of the Alliance forces on Talgara 9, leaned forward in his seat, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light as he moved. Your argument is compelling, Lieutenant Reyes, but one cooperative specimen doesn't negate the dozens of recruits who have been killed by these creatures over the years. With respect, sir, we've been treating them as enemies, and they've responded in kind, Kayla replied. The Silvaks recognized their intelligence and tried to weaponize it. I'm suggesting we recognize it and try to form an alliance instead. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber at her bold proposal. An alliance with predatory beasts? One council member scoffed. With intelligent native inhabitants of a planet we've claimed as our training ground, Kayla corrected firmly. The Tarvoks know this world better than we ever will. They've evolved to survive its most extreme conditions. Imagine what we could learn from them if we approached with respect instead of fear. Captain Maroth, who had been silent until now, spoke up in support. The lieutenant's point has merit. Our casualties on training exercises have always been highest in Tarvok territories. If there's even a possibility of reducing those losses through understanding rather than conflict, it deserves exploration. General Krellon's multifaceted eyes studied the Tarvok, which stood calmly beside Kayla, its intelligent gaze moving between the council members as if following the discussion. "And what would you propose, specifically, Lieutenant?" he asked finally. "A pilot program," Kayla replied without hesitation. "Using this Tarvok as our first point of contact, we establish communication protocols and begin to map their social structures and territories. We modify our training routes to respect their boundaries rather than challenging them. And eventually, perhaps, we find ways to coexist that benefit both species." The council deliberated for hours after her presentation, but in the end, they approved a modified version of her proposal. The Tarvok would remain at Outpost Vanguard as part of a research initiative, with Kayla assigned as primary liaison due to the bond they had already established. "It's not exactly what I proposed," she told Dr. Tavran after the decision was announced. "But it's a start." The xenobiologist smiled, her delicate features lighting up with excitement. "It's revolutionary, Lieutenant. No other Alliance outpost has attempted direct cooperation with indigenous apex predators. The research possibilities alone are extraordinary." Kayla nodded, but her attention was on the Tarvok beside her. Over the past few days, she had begun to recognize subtle variations in its body language, vocalizations, and eye movements that conveyed different states: alertness, curiosity, contentment. They were developing a primitive form of communication, bridging the vast evolutionary gap between their species through mutual respect and observation. "I think I'll call you Zakar," she said to the Tarvok, naming it after the valley where they had first met. "If that's okay with you." The creature blinked slowly, then made a soft rumbling sound that she had come to associate with agreement. "Zakar it is, then." 1 month later, Kayla stood at the edge of Outpost Vanguard, watching the alien sun rise over the jagged mountains, just as she had on her first day. But now she wasn't alone. Zakar sat beside her, its obsidian armor plates gleaming in the purple light of dawn. Captain Marath approached, his scales shifting from blue to green as he moved. "The new Alpha class arrives today," he said by way of greeting. "They've all been briefed on the Tarvok initiative. Some are skeptical, of course." Kayla smiled. "They'll learn." Indeed. Marath's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, that gesture of respect. "General Krillon has approved the expansion of your program. 5 more Tarvoks have been identified as potential candidates for cooperative training." "That's excellent news," Kayla replied, genuinely pleased. The past month had seen remarkable progress. With Zakar's help, they had begun mapping Tarvok territories throughout the region, adjusting training routes to avoid unnecessary confrontations. Recruit casualties had dropped by nearly 30% as a result. "The Alliance Command is taking notice," Marath continued. "Your approach, using understanding rather than dominance, challenges many of our long-held assumptions about interspecies relations. It has implications beyond Talgera 9. Kayla understood what he was saying. The Galactic Alliance had encountered numerous intelligent or semi-intelligent species across its territories. The default approach had always been to classify, contain, and control. Her work with Zakar suggested another path, one of mutual respect and cooperation. "We still have a long way to go," she said modestly. "There's so much we don't understand about Tarvok society, communication, cognition." "But you've made a start," Marath replied. "Sometimes, that's the most important step." As he left to prepare for the new recruit's arrival, Kayla turned back to the alien landscape before her. The Zakar Valley stretched out, still wild, still dangerous, but somehow less threatening than it had seemed that first morning. Zakar rose to its feet, looking toward the dense forest with evident interest. It was time for their morning patrol, a routine they had established to maintain the bond between them and to gather more data on Tarvok behavior in the wild. "Ready to go?" she asked, checking her gear one last time. The Tarvok made that soft, rumbling sound of agreement, already moving toward the perimeter gate where they would begin their journey. As they set out together, human and predator, allies rather than enemies, Kayla reflected on how far they had come. She had arrived on Talgara 9 determined to prove that humans deserved a place in the Alliance's elite forces. Instead, she had discovered something far more valuable, that strength could be found in understanding, that connections could form across the most unlikely divides, and that sometimes the most dangerous predator on the planet might just become your most loyal friend. Ahead of them, the alien forest awaited, filled with dangers and discoveries yet to be made. Kayla smiled. They would face them together.